Great. Our third of a three-part series, Living the Faith, today takes us to a topic or an effort that we as a church have supported for more than several years now. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say a few words about the series itself. Living the Faith occurs every year now in our Adult Forum programming, based on the conviction that proclaiming the love of God in Christ for every person, our mission, is meaningless if it's not accompanied by acts of service. So we were joined the first of the three-part series by Rod Stewart of New Horizons Ministry, the executive director. We are thankful for that connection, in particular to Jim Margard, who initially reached out to Rob and put us in conversation, he and I, and since that has really been quite a great organization to support, and we're happy to see a towel drive underway, reflective of that particular forum session. So thank you to Nancy and Terry for helping to coordinate that. Then we were joined by Liz Jarrett of Compass Housing Alliance. You can find both of those forums online as well as this one. We will be recording it and posting it later to our YouTube channel. Just go to Queen Anne Lutheran on YouTube and you can find all of those things and more. So today, it's great to welcome one of our own, Marc Oplinger, to tell us more about Core Tanzania.
Good morning, everybody. And Catherine will also be contributing to this presentation. It's kind of a two-part deal. We, interestingly enough, 2 years ago, almost to the date, I presented some design updates on this project along with Jeanette, who kind of introduced the overall program for Core Tanzania. And then, so that was 2 years ago. 1 year ago, I was actually in Tanzania this week on my second trip there, overseeing some construction. So today, I'll be doing just sort of an update on the construction progress, and then Catherine will talk more about what it's been like to actually get the school up and running. I don't know how many of you are following Core Tanzania on Facebook and Instagram, or on their own webpage, but there's a lot of great information there, and frankly, more updated photos than what I'm going to show you today. They just put up a bunch in the last week or so, which is great. That shows the school classroom building having been completed and is actually operational. And I think this past week they actually got their solar panels up, so they actually have electricity, which is amazing. So I'm going to be jumping between a couple of different presentation files, if you will, here. So bear with me in transitions. And I tried to smooth this out and make it as coherent a story as possible, but it's such a wonderful, rich story that I had, frankly, a tough time just trying to figure out. I could talk about this for hours. So I'm going to try to boil this down to 20 minutes at best, and then Catherine can speak for another 10 or 15 minutes, and that'll allow us about 20 minutes for a Q&A session after that. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and we'll see how well this really works. Okay. All right, can you all see Michael there? All right, some of you may have already seen this, but this was a post from a while back on their Facebook site that right when construction was beginning on the classroom building, but I thought it'd be fun to see. Can you hear the video? Can you hear this? Damn. All right. Any pointers on how to get the audio onto the Zoom here?
Mark, before you shared, did you click share sound, share computer sound?
Okay.
So unshare.
Okay, thank you. Stop. Because there's a couple other videos here, so it's going to be important that we get this to work.
And then when you click share and find the video you want, there's a little box.
Yep, I see that now. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. Take two, Michael. Here we go.
Greetings from Bushasha.
Is that working?
Got
I'd
it.
like to give you a little bit of update on how we are proceeding here. We are currently pouring the slab, and we hope in a week or so we'll start raising the walls of the school. Thank you.
All right. So that was about a year ago. Actually, sorry, forgive me. That was August of 2019. So, all right. Next up, I'm going to do just a bit of a recap on the design here, but first a little orientation. So this is a snip, obviously, of Google Maps that shows you where Dar es Salaam is in Tanzania. So personally, I flew into Dar and then took a local plane to Bukoba, which is on the western side of Lake Victoria. Again, I don't know how clearly this is showing up on your screens, but there's just a small peninsula here that's obscured by the pointer. And then within that, you see this tiny little square, and that is the project site. So all that to say is that this is very rural Tanzania. This is literally out in the middle of nowhere. And then I just thought this was fascinating. I don't know how many of you can speak Swahili, but I'll spare you the lesson at this point, but just trust me that this phrase actually says fasten your seatbelt while seated. This is on the flight in, so just this isn't the Serengeti, that's on the eastern side of the lake, but the terrain and topography is pretty consistent on both sides. So this is on my way to Bukoba. And then once on the ground, this just gives you an idea of the, sort of the landscape, a lot of grasses, sort of copses of trees and so on. This bay here was that sort of crescent-shaped bay that you may have noticed on the inset that I showed earlier. So basically, Bukoba is a city that's on the lake. Bushasha is the village where the school is, where the Banobis live, where Michael comes from. And to get there, it's about an hour and a half by truck. The first 20 minutes of which are actually on paved roads, and the rest of it is dirt roads like this. So it's very slow going, especially during the rainy season, where the roads are often very rutted and wet. Those are school kids you see there off in the distance. We did not run them over. Just classic scene here. On the way, kids were super thrilled whenever they see a white person. They call it out, and Catherine, help me here. What is it? Mamubu? I can't remember the exact word, but anyway, it was
Mugumbu.
Magumbu. Thank you. So they cars are far and few between. So this was a really fun moment on my first trip there, sort of introduction. This is the project site. This is just a few weeks prior to the moment that Michael had in the video there. But what you can see is that the ground has been stripped of all grass. This was all done manually. It's been prepared to receive the floor slab for the classroom building. This is the first of two phases. The other classroom building will be up and further to the right here, the two of them, and I'll show you some plans in a moment, but the two of them ultimately will act together to create a series of courtyards that and try to create as much of a campus feel as possible within what is otherwise a wide open landscape, as you can see. There is a slope to the site. The school property runs just about to this line here, and then it dives down into a small ravine. But on the uphill side, you can see there's about a good 50 or 60 foot difference between the upper portion of the site and the lower portion of the site. This is ultimately where the houses are going to be. This road winds its way up here to the right and connects back to the main road that you saw in some of the earlier photos. This shot here, again, it's just an extraordinary landscape. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's amazing. It's very quiet, very serene. This is the water tank. So there's a well here. This is one of two on the site, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that is the only source of water on the site, and it's pumped. The water is pumped daily by a gas-powered generator. Another view of the upper portion of the site where the houses will be located. And you can see down here, this is where the school buildings are or will be. All right, so this is what it's all about. It's about these kids. This is a classic, typical classroom scene right now, upwards of 100 kids in a classroom. This is at the primary school level. This is the problem that Core Tanzania is trying to solve, reduce classroom sizes. This is a kid's school book. I found this in your bedroom, actually, Catherine, at your home there. But I thought it was fascinating that this is how kids see school. And so we were trying to, it's highly institutionalized, somewhat militaristic in its layout and planning. This is actually a shot of the primary school that's about 5 miles down the road from where the Bushasha school is. Shows you sort of the conditions of the schools that you often see there. Just a quick recap on design. This is the overall site plan. These are the two classroom buildings that I mentioned earlier. Here's that winding road that you saw. And then this is where the staff housing is located on the site. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a pretty good drop in this area here. That's why they're so far apart. That's that 60-foot drop. And then ultimately there's a play field. There's some outhouses, and we'll talk about those more at the end of the presentation.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
Quick question for you in the chat field. Jackie wants to know how you will deal with, or how will you deal with the steep gradient between the upper housing area and lower school buildings in the rainy season?
So good question. And I see that I'm trying to keep this short here, so I'm gonna have to speed up or skip some stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, Jackie, that road, when it rains, I don't know if you noticed how red all of the soil is. It's got a lot of clay in it. The water does not percolate into the soil. It just runs off. And so there's a series of, so on the road itself, that's where there was some challenges around drainage. And so they actually cut in a series of drainage channels and diverters to keep all that water from flushing down into where the classroom buildings are. The classroom buildings themselves are on a 6-inch bed of sand with crushed rock over that. And a vapor barrier. So that's what keeps moisture from getting up into the classroom structure itself. And then you'll also see a picture later on where they installed a drainage pipe around the perimeter of the schools to divert any water that's flushing down that hill towards the classroom buildings. The classroom buildings are generally organized in a long bar like this. These are classrooms. There's 4 in this building. They're separated by teachers' offices and a shared workspace that can be accessed from either side. This is the library, and this is the administration center. The design, that's what you see here in this view. The design of the admin building, we ended up changing, and I'll explain that. I'll explain why in a little bit. Has to do with how complicated this roof was, or turned out to be. It's a reciprocal building. Again, you see the 4 classrooms, and this building has the cafeteria and the kitchen with it. This is phase 1, so you will see pictures of this building being constructed and after it's completed. And then these are the original scheme for the staff housing, and I'll talk more about how that developed. but generally speaking, these are duplexes, so you actually see 2 living units, both with an entry porch, a great room, a kitchen, a service porch in the back, and then 2 bedrooms. And then this scheme actually had a shared bathroom, and they ended up moving away from that and incorporating bathrooms, private bathrooms in each of the units. This was an idea about a guard station at the top of the hill that's been pushed off in terms of the schedule. The original intent was to have the well here, which will also serve the community, and just an office, if you will, for the night guard. And then ultimately, this is the headmaster's house, and again, that's in a future phase. And but generally speaking, it's very similar to the other teachers' homes. It's just bigger. It's got 3 bedrooms, a bigger great room, but otherwise has that common element of a porch and kitchen and a service porch in the back. This is a shot of the house as it was modeled. We had a team at my office, 4 or 5 people who gave their time to draw up all these drawings and do the modeling work. And you'll see, again, some actual shots of the house once it's completed in the next deck. One of the key features in the house is a natural ventilation, and so that's what gives its roof form here. So the intent is to have air come through the windows and then passively rise up, and hot air rise up out through vents in the upper portion of the roof. You'll see that in both the classroom buildings and in the homes themselves. This is a lighting study model. More about that later because we actually have real pictures. And again, just for orientation, these were just some of the models in the early part of the design phase. And here's a shot of the classroom buildings on the lower portion of the site and the houses once they're all completed on the upper portion. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to go real fast. All of this construction was done manually. There's a generator, as I mentioned. The only other power tools are a drill and a circular saw on the site. So all of the excavation, all of the concrete mixing and placement were all done by hand. Here you see them digging are preparing the ground for the strip footings on the classroom building. This is up at the first teacher's home here, and you're seeing the formwork in the trenches. By the way, all this grading was done by hand. They took portions of dirt from the upper part of the slope and pushed them to the lower part of the slope so that they could get flat enough, big enough area of flat grade for the houses themselves. These are beautiful rocks. The reason I'm showing you this picture is because that's what they used to for the aggregate in the concrete. This is the rock crusher. That was all done by hand. There was a few of these guys, and all day long they pounded rocks. You've heard the expression, right? Go pound rocks. Well, this guy does it. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of it. And likewise for timber, there's very little wood on the project, but when they needed it, they harvested eucalyptus trees. And again, these were all cut by hand. Well, they were cut manually with power saws. So it's all rough timber. It's not like you go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of 2x4s that are all perfectly straight and consistent in their sizing. So that posed some challenges a little bit later. This is the crew. These are the guys. They live on site. They work 6 days a week. They have homes and families in the villages, but they live here in this glamorous, beautiful modernist shed. It's so that's where they live. This is how you get rebar from one end of the site to the other. You carry it. This is how you get wood from one end of the site to the upper portion. You carry it. So these are the formwork for the strip footings that you saw earlier. And I'm going to just keep going through here. So these guys are super fun to work with. They were very well organized, very clean. This is the concrete mixing pit. So they literally took portions of stone and sand and cement and mixed them by hand in these pits, and then carried them with 5-gallon buckets and placed them. So here you see, yeah. So these are the younger, less experienced guys. That's why they're not the contractors guys. That's why they don't have the hard hats and the safety vets and all of that. They are working barefoot. This guy, he was the mixer. He was the chef, if you will. All the others were sous chefs and runners.
Wow.
I'm going to skip the video. So here we are placing it by hand. Hundreds of, go ahead.
And those are the boards that are rough cut.
Yes, actually these boards were milled. I think the contractor brought these.
Okay.
But the boards that I was talking about were actually, there are a few beams in the project, so those really the structural beams that were used. But you see all of these stakes, these are all cut from, it's not like a sapling, but they grow really fast, and they're really skinny. They make fencing out of it. They use it for lath to build houses with, and so on. It's kind of their version of bamboo. So anyway, just to give you these are reinforcement bars. That's a new technology here. So there was a lot of training that went in that had to be done to get these in place. So I'll show you that one later too. Anyway, at the end of a long day, here they are cleaning up, heading home. As I mentioned earlier, that's the only power tool. This is Bill. He's the superintendent. He lives in Ballard. He was there for 6 months, shut his business down, went over there, donated all of his time to get this project up and running. But whatever blocks didn't come in the right size, we had to cut them by hand. So you see here, they're starting to lay the stem walls for the classroom building. And then they infill that with the concrete slab. And here's the sand and the subgrade that I was talking about earlier that concrete goes over. So this is a delivery truck. This is about 50,000 pounds of stuff, steel, cement. There's 100 cement bags in here. This is the piping that I mentioned earlier that we ended up drilling by hand to make perf pipe out of, drain pipe. So that's a couple of guys drilling those holes. All that stuff was procured from shops like this in Bukoba. It's not like you go to Home Depot and order up a bunch of stuff. It's you go door to door, you get the best deal, you negotiate. Here's Michael calling somebody else to see if they actually, this guy was making a recommendation about where to find that perf pipe that we ended up buying from his wife in a different store down the block. This is the hardware store. I forget her name, but she was super sweet, and she was wearing this 1950s pink dress. She looked phenomenal in it. So these are all spy photos. That's why they're taken from that angle. They don't know I'm taking their picture. This is negotiating for the contract for the concrete block. These are steel frame windows that we looked at that we ultimately rejected because they just didn't have the fit and finish that we were looking for. This is how they're fabricated with these electric arc welders with a couple of wires plugged into that little outlet right there.
Yikes.
Yikes. This is how it works. Ultimately, we went with aluminum windows like this. You'll see more of that later, but lots of talking and explaining to local officials about what was being done here and what the construction methodology is that was being used. Lots of explaining. So,
Mark, we have another question. Can you take it? It's from Nancy, and I saw she had her hand up as well. But in the chat field, the question is, did you coordinate with the U.S. Embassy in Dar or the Peace Corps?
I did not. I don't know, Catherine, if you can speak to that, if your folks had any interface with them. I do know that they did were highly engaged with the local school district administrators, and you saw some of those in those pictures I was just showing you. But anything further than that, Catherine?
Yeah, no, there was nothing with the embassy or Peace Corps. We did work with another nonprofit that I'm forgetting the name of, but I can check with my parents if you're interested for the well and things like that. Some special projects. We had other help from other organizations, but there was no collaboration with the embassy or the Peace Corps specifically.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because the USAID at the embassy, you know, they have education experts there. And also a lot of the Peace Corps volunteers are teachers by background. They do help at the schools and volunteer. Of course, now, you know, with the virus, they're probably not there, but they will be. They will be again.
Yeah, so one reason the teacher housing was incorporated in the project was that was to incentivize teachers to come out of the cities and come live and stay in the village. So the housing is provided free to the teachers and their families. Okay, so most of those pictures I showed you were from my first trip in 2019. As I mentioned, I went back a year ago, so 2020, and this is an update. So progress. This is the classroom building before the roof is on. I love this picture. It reminds me, I don't know if any of you have been to the Greek ruins, and this is obviously not a ruin, but it's that same state where it's just raw structure. And then you can see here works in progress. So they use hand-built formwork to form up these columns, and then they apply plaster to them to get that smooth finish that you saw in the earlier photos. Here's some of those wood beams that I was talking about earlier that were fabricated, if you will, from locally harvested eucalyptus. This steel beam here was a bit of a conundrum. It was designed as a truss, and we couldn't find anybody that really understood or was willing to take on the engineering of this truss. Ultimately, we found one in Aruba, and it was tough. It was a challenge to get it fabricated, brought to the site, actually assembled on site. And so that's why in the next phase of the work, we moved away from needing any sort of steel structural work like that. Again, you start to see it's this taking shape here, how beautiful space is going to be in the overall landscape. One of the other key technological features here was, as I mentioned earlier, the steel truss systems were really problematic in getting procured. So we found a guy who does light gauge steel truss work, like you see here on the ground. This is the stuff that is actually fairly common in the US, mostly for commercial construction. You don't see it in houses too much. But they shipped all these parts to the site in trucks, and then these guys assembled the trusses on the ground, as you can see, and then put them in place. So that was a big win in that it was a one-stop shop, if you will, for procuring the materials and the labor to install the roofing system as a whole. They also put the roof deck on the trusses. And here's the net result in the classroom. Here's that feature I was pointing to earlier in the diagrams about light and air coming in from those clerestory windows at the top. And then ultimately, this is what it looks like on day one in the classroom. What's really cool, yeah, this blackboard, this is fascinating. I don't know if you think, this blackboard is actually cast in place as part of the wall, and then they paint it and polish it to get that blackboard, chalkboard there. So again, just some more fun shots about procurement. Lots of talking, lots of shopping. Here's negotiating with the window guy. Here's negotiating with the door guy. Here is the gentleman that fabricated all the furniture. Really beautiful stuff. In the end, super sturdy. This stuff will last for 50 years. It's amazing. Again, all done by hand. A lot of the problem solving happened at the kitchen table. So we did a lot of sketching and so on. This was the morning ritual, coffee. This must have been a weekend because we had scrambled eggs. That was a treat. Here they are, morning meeting with the guys, and here's the happy dance I was talking about before. This is the spirit of the crew. This is how they blow off steam at the end of the day. Super great guys. Work like crazy. Oh, so more standing around trying to figure out troubleshooting. This is a bathroom. This is an electrical outlet. What's the problem? Well, there's a window right here. Can't get the power to the outlet, can't get the wires there. So we ended up cutting this out and moving it over to another wall. So there was lots of on the fly fixes like that. This was a very serious conference here. As you can see, this was us trying to pick the paint colors. And so, that's Michael and the superintendent and a gentleman named David. He's the one who took Bill's place after Bill came back to the US. And so the idea here is we were just trying to find something that was complementary with the overall surroundings, and we ended up going, this color here is the base color. Pretty much everything's painted that, and then we had some highlights of this sort of pale green, fresh green tone there. These are the houses under construction. Again, concrete block, and then every 3 rows we have this concrete bond beam, and those bond beams were poured in place. So a lot of work getting this system of boards to be installed, used, and demounted, cleaned, and used again. These are all this forest of rebars, and the white stuff is the PVC piping for the wiring that will eventually come into the house. Here's the roof going on. So here's that light gauge truss work I was talking about earlier. And there's the finished product. Here's the model, true to form. So what you see here again, this is the front entry porch. These 3 windows are for the great room. These 2 go into the kitchen. Here's the bathroom window. This is the back service porch. And then these 2 windows were, this is the first house. So these got changed in later iterations. This would have been the shared restroom here. Turns out when they were talking to teachers that they just didn't like that idea. The reason it was shared was so that they could use the what's we're calling a composting toilet. Isn't really true composting. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And for that to work, you needed a certain amount of volume. So that's why we were trying to pair these up. Ultimately, they moved away from that for privacy reasons, and we went with a more traditionally plumbed restroom. And then that's just the back side here. These are the bedroom windows. And then here are those clerestory windows and vents that I'd mentioned earlier. This is building the cistern. This is where they will pump the water to and store the water. This is at the top of the site at the access road. It's meant to be shared with the community. That was the deal that was struck with the church group that provided the funding for those 2 wells. This is, and Catherine will speak more to this, but again, I just have to share this with you. This is before the classrooms were ready. This was a temporary classroom in the church in the village, but this is Michael speaking to the kids.
Very good. How are you? Very good.
Very good. Good morning, sir. So, cute kids. This is the sketch of the gang toilets. This is the ones that were installed down by the classroom building. So basically 3 stalls plus a changing room. This is the girls' room. The boys' room is pretty much the same, except on this end they have a urinal. And that was the foundation work for it. These are the composting pits. They ended up rebuilding this to get rid of the gap. This was sort of a prototype. And again, I think the deck that Catherine has more. Actually, do I have that deck, Catherine? I can't recall.
I also have it, so I can.
Okay. Do you want to
pull it up
start
in a
with
second.
that? I will. Why don't you go ahead and share that update that your mom prepared, and we'll go from there. I know we're running late here, so forgive me, but that was a whole lot of information, a whole lot of ground to cover.
Great to see everything.
Give me a second to pull that up. I have to find it.
Okay. I might have it as well. Any questions in the meantime while we're searching?
What's the current state of the construction? Is the construction done, or is there more construction to be done?
There's phase 1 is complete. I will again just share my screen real quickly here because I found the more recent view. This one again was posted on Facebook, but you can see this is the classroom building. This is where the this was kind of a misfire. Unfortunately, there was supposed to be some clerestory windows here to let light into that cafeteria area. But again, this was just a misinterpretation of the drawings. There also should be a roof overhang here to protect them. And I think they're going to go back in and install that because otherwise they're just going to get all kinds of rain in there. So this is a classroom, this is a classroom, these are paired classrooms, and then there's another classroom set here in the kitchen on the end. Do you find that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Looks like Nancy has her hand up with a question though.
Yeah,
Before I pull it up.
you know, I lived in Africa for 4 years, and I worked for 2 years in projects in the villages helping women's cooperative groups. And so I've seen a lot of villages, although I haven't even been to this particular country. But I guess my comment would be when people are doing that labor by hand, like breaking up rocks, that's giving jobs for people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everybody cringes, but
well, but what I mean is, as we, you know, as the more wealthy countries come into Africa, you know, they're hesitant to automate too much. Like even on the major highways in Rwanda, we were in Rwanda for 2 years with the embassy. Even on the major projects, they still had people there by the side of the road, building a highway and you know, with trying to break up the rocks by hand because it employs so many people.
Oh, that's true. And also, this is why I think the Banobis went with a school as opposed to some other infrastructure project here, because a lot of them only know how to do manual labor. So this is part of just starting to uplift education here and bring in, you know, so that people can actually bring in and you know, be employed by higher tech, you know, bring the more modern technology, especially in healthcare. That's a huge issue. And sanitation, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, to your point right now, that's how, you know, that's a job. And part of the intent here too is to train the local folks here so that they own this technology and know how to build these sorts of structures with locally sourced materials. As opposed to, I didn't share it, but there was a project in the next village over that was literally trucked in a shipping container and erected there. So it was, you know, it was totally imported, much like the schools that were built that I showed you earlier that were sort of militaristic. All of that is just imported, labor, materials, everything. So here, this is more grassroots, and it's kind of a starter kit, if you will. And the hope is that you know, like I said, they can continue. They got a lot of interest from neighboring villages, and so they were coming to look and see how they could do this themselves in their own villages. So,
Okay, so I did find those photos, Mark.
okay. Yeah, I've got
do
them
you want
up
me to go
too. I
ahead and-
found them as well. So if you want to run with it, why don't you go ahead and then, since you kind of
Okay.
segue into the next
Sounds
one
good.
as well.
All right. So here we go. These are the toilets that Mark was just talking about. Here's one view of them and the other view from the back side. So he said the boys and the girls toilets look pretty much the same, but that is the finished product. And this was the preparation of the toilets. Mark mentioned they're composting toilets. And so the composting is done by a whole bunch of worms in the pits. And so the kids actually went on a little field trip and collected worms. And so this is a photo of them, one of the kids helping put worms inside. And since I have this deck pulled up, I'll just highlight a couple other things. Here's another view of the school that we haven't seen. This is pretty much where it's at currently. This is the cafeteria space. Is that correct, Mark?
That's the cafeteria, and that's that shot down the classroom wing that you saw earlier that I showed before the roof was on. And I don't know if it was the next slide or the one after that where you showed the sink. That's the hand wash station just outside the kitchen. So there's this whole process where the kids file in and wash their hands, and then they turn the corner and pick up their food trays.
Different view of the cafeteria. Here is the kitchen last year. And then this year we revamped and we have this giant stove, giant pot. So they're able to cook for all of the students all at once. I'll show more photos in a different slide deck of the kiddos. So I will switch over from this. And if you guys have any more questions about the construction process, we can do more questions at the end also. So let me pull up the other slide deck here. Okay, so switching over to updates about what school is looking like. This was last year in the church. This was kindergarten last year. This is one of our teachers, Editha. And last year we had 30 students, and Editha was teaching. Editha and the other teacher, Joan, were both teaching full time, even though we had the kids split in half. So 15 kids would come in the morning, 15 in the afternoon, but both teachers were there all the time. So it was seven or eight kids to a teacher all day. And you can see here, and in the next photo, I'll show also the Montessori materials that we're using that the teachers are very excited about. They're really excited about this different way of teaching than is normally done in schools in Tanzania, which is really reliant on like memorization and things like that. When Keela, who is a supporter from Seattle, when she went and trained the teachers on the Montessori materials, they were super excited, saying that these materials really make them think. The types of activities they do really make them think. So they were very excited about that. And both teachers are going to a training later in April about not necessarily Montessori specifically, but still ways of teaching that get the students to think. And they're very much looking forward to that. Here's a shot of the new classroom the permanent classroom building with some of the Montessori materials. Also, you can see that the kids really enjoy them as well. And again, this was last year's kindergarten. Just another shot of the joy that these kids are getting out of school. Like, this is not a conventional classroom at all. This is not where they would have expected to go to school. This photo, you can see in the background the bags that the Queen Anne women made, which we're very excited about. So thank you for that. We had cubbies built for the kids to store all their things. And you can see that they were super excited about their new bags, having their own space to store their bags. They're really excited about this. Here is a photo of, I think this is this year's first grade. But this photo is to show that at the beginning of every day, they start with singing and story time. And the kids really love this. Since we're trying to have them all picking up English, that's one of the main goals of this school project. The teachers they'll do as much of their teaching as possible in English, and same with reading books. They'll read the books in English, and then whatever more they need to like describe through actions or describe using Swahili and Kihaya, they then follow up so the students get the meaning of what's happening, but everything happens in English first. Oh, and actually, I want to go back to the Montessori materials. I forgot to say something about that. We, in kindergarten, are using, like, the basis of the curriculum is Montessori. And then anything that Montessori doesn't cover that is in the required Tanzanian curriculum, we just add in, we supplement. So for example, part of the Tanzanian curriculum in kindergarten includes like hygiene and cleanliness and home tasks. So that's something that is not part of Montessori, but we've added like small activities, like washing dishes and things like that we can do at the school to cover the whole required curriculum. So in addition to singing in the morning, we also have a lot of drumming and dancing time throughout the day, which the kids really enjoy. The teacher, you can see over on the right here, she's mostly cut out of the photo, but those are the teacher's feet. The teacher is drumming and the kids are happily dancing along. And Mark showed the picture in process of making the tables and chairs. This is them in use in last year's kindergarten classroom. The kids are also, again, super excited about them. They don't have to share, like 5 people to a squished like desk in line, how they normally would be in a regular classroom. So excited to have more space. They're excited about the new things, the new furniture. But my mom is noticing that it's very loud in the classroom because they're super excited and they move around, and it's a cement floor. So that's been a challenge, but they're very excited. So that's a win. And then the school year ended in December. So their school year is with the calendar year. And then as the school year was ending, my parents were going around talking to families in the village about like recruiting the next class of students. So these are 4 of the students that are part of this year's kindergarten class. This has been a challenging process both years because it's a hard concept for people to understand that this fancy new school, that they don't have to pay anything. We asked if families can contribute something, that they do, and people have, but they only contribute what they feel comfortable contributing. There are no fees. They don't pay for food or uniforms or anything, but that's a really strange concept. And so that has taken a lot of talking and like direct home visits to families to make sure that they understand that there are no fees associated with this project. And once they do understand that, they're very excited.
Catherine, there's
a comment there?
A question from June. Yeah, that relates to what you're discussing now about the ongoing economic costs. If there are no student fees, then how do you pay for this?
Donations.
All donations?
It's
Mm-hmm.
all fund, yeah, all operating expenses, teacher salaries, construction costs and all that are all through fundraising.
Do you have any sense of what the sort of ongoing operating costs are, meaning, the cost of food.
Right.
Probably the teachers get free room and possibly board. Is there a kind of an operating kind of mainline budget that you see going forward?
I don't know if you can speak to that, Catherine, but I think right now they're just trying to get the school built. I know that they do have a sustainable financial model in sight. I don't have the details on that.
Do you know how much teachers get paid?
I don't have these numbers off the top of my head. This is definitely something that I can check with my parents about, and we can send that out to all of you or just to you, Jim, whoever else is interested. But yeah, I don't know those off the top of my head.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just be curious about the sustaining or ongoing kind of operating costs and kind of what teachers are paid, and just some sense of economics of that.
Yeah, I'll just put it this way: the dollar goes really far there. I mean, everything that you saw was done. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the first round, phase 1, and teachers for 3 years. Was within that initial fundraising goal of, but I can't remember if it was $300,000 or $500,000.
It was originally set at 500,000.
500,000, yeah. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions right now, or should I keep moving?
Just a quick question. So in the oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Meg, and then Nancy.
Are families mistrustful about like it's free, so they're wondering what the catch is? Is that at all?
It's not that they like know that it's free and they think something must be up. It's maybe they hear that it's free and they don't believe that could be the case. Or like I've heard concerns that people are like, people who know my dad do not have this concern, but it's a village of like 5,000 people. He doesn't know everyone. But people have definitely expressed like mistrust of him in the sense of he must be doing this for profit. It doesn't make sense that he's saying that he has no stake in this.
Yeah, it's like it's too good to be true. And
right.
And Catherine mentioned it's a pay what you can thing, and that's the tricky line they're trying to do here is they want to make sure that the families have some quote unquote skin in the game, that they're committed to having their kids show up every day ready to go, and that's another challenge. It's just, and so it's a two-way street here. It's like they actually interview families. Not everybody who applies gets to go to the school. It's only 30 kids per class. There's way more kids than that in the village. So the family needs to make a commitment in terms of making sure that the student is fully supported, and then a financial contribution if possible.
Thank you.
And Nancy had a question also.
Yes, I think it's important. What Catherine alluded to is to think about it from their point of view of this brand new fancy building going up. Remember when you drove up in your car, Mark, and they were just all agog?
Mm-hmm.
Think about how they're perceiving this brand new building, and how that is suddenly in their village. And I think it's a great project, and it looks like it's very well constructed. It looks wonderful. The kids look so happy. But I think perspective is important. I know I've seen examples in other countries where people actually move into these buildings because they're so much nicer than their homes, so it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a condo, I'm going to move in, all the families move in, things like this.
Yeah. There's not only that, there's the security issue around the furniture, because it is wood. That's why they have a night guard there, because to fend off the potential for basically looting the classroom building for firewood and fuel. So yeah. So it's
you're exactly right, Nancy, and that's why my parents are spending a lot of time talking to individual families and making sure they understand and are comfortable with this and can benefit from it if they want to.
Exactly. And if I could add on to that, it's not just the families, it's the district administrators and so on, because they're seeing this as a potential threat in some cases to the system that they're invested in. They're trying to understand how this all works together. So it's not like a, bunch of cowboys riding into town and saying, we got a better thing here, move aside. It's really, it's a village and district-wide collaborative effort here.
Yeah, and there can be jealousies that develop, between villages and people in the village,
Yeah.
who owns what, and yeah. So I'm just, but I'm really impressed. It's a great project.
Thank you.
It's phenomenal to think that this whole thing started, over the kitchen table in the Banobi house. It's the
Which is where I'm
impact.
sitting currently.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move through a couple more slides, and then if there are more questions at the end, we can do that. So this is now in the new school year. So this is this year's first graders. They graduated from kindergarten. They've moved on from Montessori, so you don't see those materials anymore in this classroom. This is a shot of them practicing their letters on chalkboards that were donated, which is fantastic. And this is Madam Aditha. They call their teachers Madam. So this is Aditha. She'll be teaching first grade this year, and Joan is staying in kindergarten with the new students. And now I'll go into a couple supplementary activities that we have going on at the school. This was a few weeks ago. We had staff from the village clinic come in and do some quick health checkups with all the students. And they also did a session on, general health and hygiene, simple things like hand washing and things like that. And we're planning to have staff from the clinic do routine visits. I'm not sure exactly how often that'll happen, but we're planning on having that be a regular thing with all of the students. Here you see our version of PE time. This is some of the kindergartners playing tug of war. We are still working on the soccer field. There's going to be a full-size soccer field, which is required for all schools in Tanzania, which is funny because these are tiny babies and they're going to have a full-size soccer field, but that seems fun. We're still working on that.
Sorry to interrupt. That field's been reconstructed twice, by the way, because it got washed out the first year. Somebody was asking about rains earlier. That was, so. Yeah,
we weren't able to get grass planted super quickly. And it was, we did the whole thing with manual labor, flattening the field, preparing the field. But then there were huge rains and it washed out. So we've had to reconstruct. So they're still working on that. And in the meantime, they have PE time just on the grass field outside the school. And here is the field trip that I mentioned earlier, harvesting worms for the toilets. The kids really had a lot of fun with that, as you can see. And then a different field trip. This was at the end of last school year. They went to a nearby village that has a fish farm. So we took the students there because we're hoping to eventually do fish farming at our school, partly as practical training, partly so that we can actually use the fish at the school and have some protein in the school lunches. And this was really cool for the kids because field trips are not the norm at all. And so we will hopefully be visiting this fish farm with the new students as well this year. And finally, I will leave you with this adorable picture of this year's first graders heading up the hill on their way to go home. And if there are any more questions, either about the construction part or the students and the curriculum, I know we're a teensy bit over time, but if people can stay and there are questions, Mark and I are happy to answer.
Can you tell me anything about the selection process in terms of, it's clearly not based on ability to pay. So what is it based on when it comes to criteria for selection to the school or admission to the school?
Mark, maybe you might be able to add to this, but in general, it's a lottery system.
Okay.
So, I mean, and we're trying to make sure that everybody has an equal chance. So that's why we're going and visiting homes and making sure everybody understands that there are no fees and understands how it works. But then once people submit their names, then it's a lottery system.
And I see a question from Jim about the teaching positions. They seem like they are highly desirable. Do you have a good selection pool, and are there any credential requirements?
I can't speak to that. So one thing I wanted to mention earlier is that this school was designed to Ministry of Education standards. There is a standards book. And then as far as like credentialing, so we actually had to get a permit from them to build the school, not just a construction permit, but we had to get authorization from the Ministry of Education to move forward with these plans. As far as credentialing goes, I can't really speak to that. As Catherine mentioned earlier, you know, they're using the Montessori model for the earlier kids. I don't know what happens in the upper grades. And as far as the talent pool goes, again, the Banobis recognized early on that getting good quality teachers to come out of the cities and get invested in these local, you know, these village communities was going to take a pretty high incentive. And so that's the housing and, you know, free room and board basically provides that. I don't know that they had problems finding teachers. I don't know, Catherine, if you can speak to that, like how many actually applied for the position?
We, for the first two teachers, there were a couple more people who applied in addition to the ones that we hired. The two that we hired were like far and away the best candidates. I don't know specifically about credential requirements, but a big thing we definitely need for all of the teachers is for them to be comfortable and proficient teaching in English. That's a big problem in high schools when the language of instruction switches to English, but there are very few teachers who are actually comfortable teaching in English. And then the students also are not comfortable with English. So it's just a mess where the education is not being translated properly. So both of our teachers, Aditha and Joan, have taught, I think, upwards of 10 years in English medium schools. So that was really important for us. And I meant to mention this, but I forgot earlier. So thank you for reminding me of this. We're in the process of hiring a third teacher who hopefully will be able to serve as a head teacher, which is their version of a principal. So for that type of position, that person still would need to have experience teaching in English, and then hopefully have some leadership qualities as well. And we do have several candidates. The training program that I mentioned that Aditha and Joan are going to in April, the organization that does that program, theirs is just maybe a week long, but they also do a much longer, more comprehensive teaching training program. And so we have, I believe, 3 candidates who are graduates of that program. I don't know where we're at in the interviewing hiring process, but there are at least 3 candidates from that program.
Yeah, so for those that may not be familiar, the model here was just to build add one classroom each year. And so so that would be the third teacher, and there would be a fourth after that, and it's one classroom per grade. And so that was how they were going to get that 3-year window to allow them to build the second phase and have that come online in time, you know, to on time so that the kids can progress from grades 3 to 4. That's when they would jump to the second classroom building. Again, I know we're running long here. There's one last anecdote on the construction side, and it's relevant to this topic, is that, I'd mentioned the admin portion of the project got redesigned architecturally just to simplify the structure, but also to allow it to be built earlier than the classrooms themselves. So it's designed now as an independent structure to the classroom building. And so again, that's just another step in building up the staff and leadership at the school in a progressive way.
I was just looking at the chat and I saw somebody asked about girls and boys, the ratio there. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's pretty even.
Looks like we have maybe time for one more question, and then we'll close. One more. Okay, well, Catherine and Mark, thank you both for an outstanding presentation. How exciting to hear these developments. Really neat to hear. For those of you who would like to remain around in a half an hour at least, or about 20 minutes, we have our coffee hour, and then at 12:30, a brief discussion on the sermon. And don't forget, in 2 weeks, we resume our forum programming with the first of a 4-part series on the demonic. So please join us for that. That'll be on February 28th. Once again, thank you to Mark and Catherine. This video will be posted on YouTube later today. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.